is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer live in the wee hours of Friday morning in November to recap the Ravens' ridiculous, absurd, instant classic win over the Cincinnati Bengals. The second time this season, these two teams have delivered an absolute stunning display of phenomenal offense and just some of the worst defense you've ever seen in all your life. We're going to dive into all of it. But first, the Banner Ravens podcast is brought to you by Toyota. Toyota has been building a legacy of excellence for years, from developing hybrid technology to upping the standards of safety and efficiency. Toyota is always innovating, always making progress. And with a superior lineup of in-stock SUVs, including the adventure-ready RAV4 and capable, affordable Corolla Cross, you can experience the legacy of Toyota for yourself. Visit buyatoyota.com, the official website for deals, to find out more. Toyota, let's go places. All right, Jonas, I picked the word of the day for this one, and it's barn burner. Definition, one that arouses much interest or excitement. First known use, 1951. I do wonder if there was a farmer somewhere who had his barn burned down, and everyone came to watch with popcorn and said, well, at least it's entertaining. There was much burning down of the defenses in this one, but boy, was it an entertaining football game as the Ravens come out on top by 1 point, 35-34. And if you like the first matchup between these two teams back in week 5, we're sure to love this sequel in week 10.
This was incredible. This was, again, I love my job and I hate my job because the second half and like the final 6 minutes of this were just so incredible that 80% of the time I was just looking at my computer trying to finish what I needed to before the buzzer, and then the buzzer never came because you had a touchdown and another touchdown and another touchdown, and there was a 2-point conversion, and there was an onside kick, and there was penalties, so many penalties, and just the emotions in this were wild. I mean, was it crazier than the first one? I don't know. I mean, like in terms of pure shock value, entertainment value. I mean, I'm grateful that this was a Thursday night football production. I mean, obviously, if you didn't have Amazon Prime or you weren't in a local market, then you couldn't watch this. But this was just a gun show. This was a fireworks factory. This was everything you could want in like 2024 football, and then some. I mean, I'm in awe of Lamar Jackson and this offense. I'm in awe of how bad this Ravens defense is, but I'm also kind of like a little bit feeling a little bit bad for Joe Burrow. Just like the ultimate, big game and a losing effort, just the personification of close but not close enough. Just I don't know how you can feel like you could have done more in a game like this or in week 5 and come out of this series 0-2 and drop to 1-6 now against Lamar Jackson head to head. It's ridiculous.
As bad as you might feel for Joe Burrow, I mean, I might feel worse for Jamar Chase, who had 11 catches for 264 yards and 3 touchdowns 5 weeks after he had 193 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns against the Ravens. Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase were absolutely lighting up this Ravens defense, which has been much maligned. And Jonas, I don't know what the NFL has to do to bottle up whatever this was. I think this game will be remembered more than the first matchup because this was in prime time and the first one was just a Sunday afternoon game. This one might be remembered more in the long run, but both of these were great. I mean, it got me thinking about great sequels, some phenomenal movie sequels, because sequels usually disappoint. They're usually much worse than the original. Think of Hangover 2, etc. But I thought of Toy Story 2. That was a great sequel. Dark Knight following up Batman Begins. That was great. 22 Jump Street and Anchorman 2. Those are all slept on. I think this was right up there. We're going to be thinking about this game for a while, just like we were the first matchup between these two.
You're forgetting about the cinematic tribute to your people. What is?
Oh, Godfather
Mancano. There you come on, it was right there.
Yeah. nobody in the Mancano family, so far as I know, was has any mob ties. Jonas, just an absurd combination of offenses in this one. In the two matchups between these two teams, they combined for 148 points, 1,821 total yards, and 37 minutes and 45 seconds of YouTube highlights. The first matchup, if you recall, was 20 minutes and 8 seconds for the YouTube highlights, longest package I've ever seen from the NFL. This one was 17 minutes and 37 seconds. It was absolutely absurd. And you had to include it all. But I'll tell you this, the first half, it did not look like it was headed this way. This looked like a relatively low scoring game by halftime when it was 14-7. The Ravens offense did not look nearly as good as they looked in the first matchup between these two teams. And especially after the second half begins with the Bengals coming out and scoring a touchdown, you're already starting to think, all right, maybe the Bengals have the upper hand here. They're going to climb to back into the AFC North race, and they are going to take one at home from the Ravens.
Yeah, it played out a lot like the first game in Cincinnati, where I don't know what it is about this Bengals run defense. Like that. Obviously, they had B.J. Hill, who's their best run stuffer, probably their best defensive tackle, point blank, period. But he was playing with a rib injury. Clearly not 100%, or he shouldn't have been 100%. And what we said on Tuesday's preview pod, I expected some positive regression for the Ravens in the run game because it was implausible that Cincinnati would basically set the best line of scrimmage of any defense the Ravens have played this year. And they did again tonight. Obviously that they got Ravens broke off some nice runs in the third and fourth quarter. But again, there was just nothing for Derrick Henry to run through. I don't know how much of that was play calling. I don't know how much of that was execution. But for some reason, this Bengals run defense, which was last in the NFL in run defense success rate, again, just kind of gives it to the Ravens in weird ways. And for whatever reason, the Ravens weren't able to capitalize whatever else they were seeding, whether it was throws downfield. Obviously, that was the first play of the game. Lamar kind of testing that Bengals secondary deep and a little bit underthrown from Rashad Bateman. Not a great effort coming back to it and kind of contesting at the catch point. But it was just a weird, funky, just morass of first half offensive play. And I mean, frankly, they were down. They were lucky to be down just 14-7.
Yeah. Did you say morass?
Yeah. MORASS.
Is that, could you
an
give me
area of muddy or boggy ground?
See, these are the kind of words that I'm saying you got to bring to the table when I ask you what our word of the day is. Morass. It sounds hilarious. It already sounds like some kind of curse word. I mean, I'll tell you what was more ass in this game, more space ass, and it was the defense. And they might have been more ass than they were in the first game because it was bad. We'll get into them in a little bit, but we do need to appreciate just how good this Ravens offense was. I mean, it is weird that Derrick Henry, for the second time these two teams met this season, also struggled on the ground. 16 carries for 68 yards, 4.3 yards per carry is not crazy. By the kind of standard that he's set for himself this season. I'll tell you, Lamar Jackson, 7 carries for 33 yards, felt like a whole lot more than that. And when there was more talk this week about Lamar Jackson not being on the practice field every day, about Lamar Jackson maybe being a little bit cautious with his knee, a week after he had just 3 carries for 4 yards, his knee seemed just fine. He was back there extending plays, making absurd, ridiculous plays like the one down by the goal line where he runs all the way to the boundary and tiptoes down the sideline, nearly gets into the end zone. Add that to the highlight package for his MVP reel this season, because that was an absurd play, and he seemed to be healthy and running fine.
I want to offer a quick correction, Paul, before we talk about the actual football. According to Google, the pronunciation is morass, so not morass, but you still get half the fun. But I just want to let the record show that I'm going to always morass.
I'm going to always pronounce it as morass the rest of my life, and I'm going to find every way to use it that I can.
Do you know what Bengals fans are saying right now? That the referees couldn't have been more ass than they were. Exactly. A lot of consternation right now on Bengals Twitter, and I guess NFL Twitter at large, about the officiating in this one. Even though the Ravens were obviously the more heavily penalized team, maybe we should start from the end of this game and work our way backward, Paul, because I asked John Harbaugh if basically what he saw on that final play, which of course ends with the Bengals looking like they're going to go for two, ended up not actually getting the Ravens to jump. We wonder, are they actually going to go for two, keep the offense back on the field? And they do go for two, and the Ravens are awfully physical at the line of scrimmage. You see Trenton Simpson just getting all up in Mike Gesicki's grill. Obviously, under the rules, you do have that 5-yard window at the line of scrimmage to be physical, but there's a difference between being physical and holding a guy. And obviously, Bengals fans, and I think probably Al Michaels, it sounds like, were of the opinion that that was more on the line of holding him. There was also the very obvious, illegal hit to the head by Travis Jones. That was not called. I think someone else pointed out that there was another illegal, hand to the face on another pass rush. Obviously,
on that same drive.
But maybe that's just that's some of the home cooking you get when you are playing in a stadium this loud, in a game this good, and the referees are just like not focused on the stuff that they should be, because they are just taking it all in, and there was a lot to take in.
It felt like an NBA game where it gets down to the final 2 minutes and they just let him play. They just swallow the whistle and they say it's LeBron versus Steph. Nobody wants to see a game decided by referees. That's what we ask for when we want to watch in the NBA. So why not do it in the NFL? We've seen games this year in the NFL get absolutely overtaken by whistles and flags in the last 2 minutes, and it's taken so much away from our overall enjoyment. So from a biased perspective, with the Ravens coming out on top, it's easy for us to say swallow the whistle for a lot of those plays, but also it adds to the overall enjoyment of a lot of these plays. And they were saying on the broadcast, like Kirk Herbstreit, who had a lot of trouble with pronunciation in this game, by the way, with names.
He was going through a lot tonight. R.I.P. Ben.
Yeah,
thinking about you, buddy.
Andre Yoshibas. That's for Kirk Herbstreit. But he was saying, you hate to see a game end like that. You hate to see a game end with penalties. I mean, that to me is more frustrating than, a play just not being flagged. That was not, I mean, maybe it's not like it was an absurd, pass interference. It was a defensive holding call, which I know is a first down, but come on, it was not the player who was even targeted on that final play. Let's go down to the to the fourth quarter, and stop me if you want to talk about a ridiculous play in this stretch, Jonas, because when the Ravens get the ball back, when the Bengals go for two deep shots on 3rd and 2 and 4th and 2 from the Ravens 34-yard line, it's 21-20. I have no idea what they were thinking throwing two deep balls. When they throw the deep ball on 3rd and 2, I think, all right, well, that means they're going for it on 4th. And then they throw another one. I guess the thinking is the Ravens defense would be expecting a short pass, so maybe you try to take them off guard, but ends up being a turnover on downs. Ravens get the ball back. It's 9:42. The following possessions go: touchdown, 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 end of game. Absurd. The Ravens score that first touchdown to take the lead 28-21, and it was just bonkers from there. Stop me when you want to talk about a play, Jonas, here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't even know where to start, because you look at those 3 Ravens touchdowns, and it's hard to order them in your mind in terms of like sheer awesomeness, because obviously you've got the Rashad Bateman one coming on 3rd and goal. If you have to settle for a field goal there, Ravens probably lose, right? Assuming that this Bengals offense marches down the field. Obviously the Ravens would have gotten the ball probably with 38 seconds or maybe less if Cincinnati could drain that thing and kind of do what the Browns did to them a couple weeks ago. You've got the Mark Andrews improv on, I think, another 3rd and long that ends up with a touchdown. A
3rd and 9
very
from
nice
Bengals 18.
Yeah, another nice redemption arc for him, considering just what he's been through, the fact that he was back in Baltimore on Thursday night against this Bengals team that ended his season, not with like any clear or obvious malice on that hip drop tackle, but I'm sure it had to be weird for him being back at the scene of the crime, so to speak. And then probably the most improbable play of any of these ones, Tylan Wallace, who had like less than, I think, 70 yards total over his Ravens career coming into 2024, scoring on an 84-yard touchdown pass where he slips a tackle from Cam Taylor-Britt, stiff arms a trailing linebacker, and then stiff arms Geno Stone, all while staying in bounds just by the slimmest of margins for an 84-yard catch and run score. I mean, it was so improbable that we were all just looking at each other in the press box like, one, is that really Tylen flipping Wallace? And two, there's no way he stayed in bounds because he was like with the Lamar Jackson tiptoe play that led to the Derrick Henry 1-yard touchdown run in the third quarter. It seemed like just by sheer probability and the fact that he was being pushed on every single one of those missed tackles, he had to have stepped out, but they didn't. They looked at the replay, and in fact, he'd kept his ankle just above that white line long enough to keep those chains moving.
Yeah, and by the way, Mark Andrews did come back in the playoffs against the Kansas City Chiefs. So technically, the season was ended by Taylor Swift. Yeah, and you add in the fact that touchdown drive, that last touchdown drive by the Ravens, was almost ended before it began by an interception by Cam Taylor-Britt that was overturned because the ball bounced out. So that drive almost resulted in the Ravens having to turn the ball over and give it back to the Bengals with the tie game of 28-28. Yeah, I mean, just as badly as the offense, as bad as they looked in the first half, and this is, it was an incredibly rare moment of struggle for this offense in the first half. I mean, that it was they're going 3 and out on their first drive. It went 3 and out, touchdown, 3 and out, 3 and out, end of half. And it, you thought of the Deontay Johnson, his first bad moment with the Ravens, getting turned around and tripping on a Lamar improv play and deep ball, and then couldn't get out of bounds. Not a great start to his Ravens career after he didn't record a catch last week. And it was just starting to look like, all right, maybe this offense is finally coming back down to earth. And then they just blow the doors off the Bengals defense. This is not a good Bengals defense. They should have taken advantage of them, but there's just no stopping this offense. There's not a single game that they can't punch their way back into. There's no deficit that they can't overcome because of how good this offense is. I mean, 14-point deficit in the second half. And they just came out when it seems like they can, when they are clicking, and they're clicking 75 to 80% of the time, they can score with any offense and they can score at will. And you talked after the game to Ronnie Stanley, who said this is the most complete offense he's ever been a part of in the NFL.
Yep, and that 2019 team finished first in the NFL in rushing and passing efficiency, according to Football Outsider /FTN. So he's been around some juggernauts.
So, I mean, that's what gives this team such an incredibly high ceiling, is you feel like they can score with anybody. You feel like they literally have the best offense in the NFL. They have the best unit there. And what's so frustrating is how the defense played today at a time when they are on a short week. I get it. But they're facing a Bengals team that they've already faced this season. And we came into this saying they can't let what happened 5 weeks ago happen again. And it happened again, Jonas. They allow 34 points. If the Bengals convert that 2-point conversion, if a holding penalty is called or they complete the pass there, we have a totally different tone on this podcast. And yes, we'd still be complimentary of the offense, but we would say that maybe the season is going to be undone by this defense. And because we're 2 days after the trade deadline, and not much was added. And it seems like Zach Orr and this defense seems to have absolutely no answers right now.
Yeah, and pass rush wasn't the problem tonight. If we want to follow up on what we said Tuesday about just the inability or the unwillingness of Eric DeCosta to go get another needle mover. I think, Nnamdi Madubuike was obviously just a beast today, 3 sacks, even though a couple of them were for kind of minimal loss. I think Adafe was in and out, but they hit Joe Burrow a bunch of times, I think 12 or 13 times. Lamar, on the other hand, was hit just the one time. Obviously, it seemed like every single time they went to play action, they, again, had those just pristine pockets that, Burrow looked like he could have spent 4 or 5 days there, honestly. It was really only on those obvious passing downs where the Ravens, I think, were really able to kind of pin their ears back and do the kind of things that we expected of them last year, and we've only gotten really in glimpses here or there this year. Before we just trash talk this Ravens secondary, Paul, though, I want to bring up a stat. Lamar Jackson, when trailing in these 2 games against the Bengals in the second half, is 26 for 35 for 383 yards and 5 touchdowns.
That's absurd. Another 4 touchdown, no interception game for him. 290 passing yards, 33 on the ground, 141.4 passer rating.
And he had like 72 passing yards in the first half.
Just ridiculous.
He was wearing a Scarface t-shirt in the locker room afterward, which I think, he was gangster tonight.
He was. All right. Should we talk about the secondary?
Yeah. I mean, like, I guess we should probably start with the newsy bits, which is that Kyle Hamilton left in the second quarter, and the Ravens proceeded to give up a touchdown, not just on that drive, but on the drive immediately following it in the third quarter. Marlon Humphrey had some nice plays.
Forced fumble, which
was
recovered.
Fumble, that was like the turning point. A lot of guys shouted him out as.
It was recovered as by Roquan Smith, which I did say before the game, Jonas, that he needed to have a big play. I don't know if a fumble
I don't think
recovery.
People are going to remember that. No. I don't think people are going to be remembering that play as the Roquan Smith play, but you never know. Brandon Stevens again had trouble mainly in that first half. I mean, obviously, Jamar Chase spent most of his time on the left side of that field, and that's where Brandon Stevens lines up. Ardarius Washington was up and down. Marcus Williams was just an absolute disaster on that 70-yard touchdown pass that immediately followed the 18-yard touchdown pass from Lamar to Mark Andrews. It looked like, I think the next gen stats people said that was cover 4, and the Bengals are running a kind of crossing pattern where you have the guy in the slot who Marcus is ostensibly responsible for, runs toward the sideline on a corner route, and Jamar Chase goes with a post and cuts into the middle of the field. And obviously Brandon Stevens on that left side was not expecting Marcus Williams to vacate his zone. And by the time that the Ravens tried to rotate the coverage over, it was sayonara. It's incredible that Joe Burrow was as effective and Jamar Chase was as effective because, again, like we talked about Tuesday, this Bengals team did not have T. Higgins. Their second leading receiver in this game was Chase Brown, and that was 9 catches, pretty much all of them checkdowns. So I know it's not as simple as like doubling him, which John Harbaugh says the Ravens did in certain spots. But how can your zone defense not be more buttoned up, not be more aware of this game wrecker who continues to wreck your shit regularly and make someone else beat you? Make them fight left-handed. It's unbelievable.
That's where Joe Burrow is going to go. Make somebody else beat you. It is do whatever you can to take him away, because he was beating you deep. He was beating you short. He was doing absolutely everything in this game. I know he's a world-class wide receiver, but Jonas, we're 10 weeks in now. We've tried to be very patient with Zach Orr and with this defense. First-year defensive coordinator, lost a lot of talent at every level, lost Jadeveon Clowney, they're one of their top pass rushers, lost Patrick Queen, lost Geno Stone, who they faced tonight. But at this point, I have yet to see really any signs of improvement. Am I missing something? Is there any reason for optimism? The great players from last year, for the most part, I know Justin Madubuike had a great sack today. Their star players are not shining nearly as bright as they did last year. And they're not sound defensively. Still communication errors. You saw Roquan Smith yapping at some of his teammates at one point because Jamar Chase was left open on a crosser and Roquan was kind of left on an island there. You saw some frustration boiling over there. And you're seeing explosive play after explosive play. I mean, the game, talk about taking the air out of the building. There was the one play 70-yard drive, which was just a deep ball to Ja'Marr Chase after the Ravens, at that point they had taken the lead for the first time in the game. And immediately Bengals come right back down on a singular play and tie it up. I don't know what else to say other than this. I don't have any real reason to believe. Nothing that I've seen is convincing me that they have an answer to the problems that they face this season.
They won despite giving up 428 yards of passing against a team that, again, could not run the ball. They won despite Justin Tucker missing an extra point and making these guys get a Lamar Jackson 2-point conversion after that Mark Andrews touchdown that made it 26-21, obviously with it too. It was, kind of back to the status quo. That they won despite, again, the run game not really being anything home to write about. Maybe some of that was Lamar, and his knee not being 100%. Obviously, he missed the practice on Tuesday. Again, he looked fine in the game, running around. I don't think you can make some of the plays that he did and not be at least comfortable moving around out there. And they won despite, 11 penalties for 81 yards, 30 of which came on that final drive with the two personal foul penalties. I think you had the Marlon Humphrey face mask, and then you had, I think, the Broderick Washington late hit on Joe Burrow. So it is the same things that this Ravens team has dealt with and at times overcome, but it's also all the hallmarks of their 3 losses this year. And again, I don't want to say that the Ravens were outplayed tonight because they won just like they won in week 5, but it was hard to feel like this was definitively the better team in the same way that you couldn't really say it was definitively the better team in week 5. But here they are, basically a 99%, with 99% odds to make the playoffs, according to the New York Times, virtual lock at this point. I think the Bengals were knocked down from like 45 to 33% or something like that. So 2 very different trajectories coming out of this game, but kind of a razor's edge between these 2 teams in both games, Cincinnati and Baltimore.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to say necessarily whether the Ravens were outplayed or not. It was a play here or there. It was a coin flip in both of these games. And when your quarterback is playing that well, when your offense is doing that well, you want to be blowing the doors off that team. And they've had games like that this season. I mean, the Broncos, obviously, they blew the doors off a week ago. They blew the doors off the Buffalo Bills back in week 3. They blew the doors off of Tampa Bay until the very end, and same with Dallas. But you just would like to feel better about the defense at this point. You're worried that the season is going to be wasted because you're going to be up in a playoff matchup and your offense is scoring points and your defense is just never able to get a shutdown drive.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not telling you or our listeners or the Ravens, coaching staff anything that they couldn't probably guess, but just to contextualize, like, big game in a losing effort for Joe Burrow and what the Ravens had to overcome, what this offense had to overcome, what Lamar had to overcome. In week 5, Burrow went 30 for 39 for 302 yards, 5 touchdowns, and a late interception. Of the 8 quarterback performances in NFL history with at least 390 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns, at least 75% accuracy, and 1 or no interceptions, Burrow's in week 5 was the only one to end with a loss. And then you go tonight, where he goes for 4 passing touchdowns, 428 passing yards, 0 passes intercepted, a completion percentage above 60. Coming into tonight, there had been 24 performances in NFL history, according to Pro Football Reference. Just 2 had lost. So you're talking about the smallest probability of a quarterback with an effort like that losing, and somehow, some way, the Ravens and the shambolic defense were able to come out with a win in spite of it.
You shudder to think about what this team's record would be if Lamar Jackson was not the quarterback of this team. I mean, seriously.
Or even like 2023 Lamar. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
This Lamar is so far and away better than last year's Lamar. But if it was last year's Lamar, if we're kind of tracking the trajectory of that year onto this year, where he didn't really become supernova Lamar until those 4 or 5 final games, this team might not even be 500.
That's crazy to think, and it is frustrating because the trade deadline's passed.
Unless
it's late in the season.
There's a change in government, and maybe certain executive orders will be pulled to benefit certain teams.
That doesn't change until January. They got some time, maybe just in time.
We got a lame duck president. Maybe Joe Biden is secretly a Lamar Jackson fan. He wants Derek DeCosta to get all the help.
He was going to be lame duck no matter what was going to happen.
Like lame duck party.
Maybe that's what he was doing when he visited Baltimore and got ice cream. He was already arranging some stuff. It was also
you guys think you need a pass rusher or another safety or what?
It was funny to see the broadcast cut to the booth upstairs and the coaching booth, and to see Dean Pease yelling angrily about something that was happening. So, I mean, it's just it's past week 10 now. I don't know how many more levers you can pull to try to change this thing. You've tried benching Marcus Williams. You've tried signing Yannick Ngakoue off the street, who was, dropped off the roster right before this game. You've tried trading for a cornerback who we haven't yet seen, to be fair, but you swap 7th round picks. Like, how many more levers can you possibly pull to try to fix this? Because nothing seems to be working right now.
Yeah, and I wish I had the on-off splits with Kyle Hamilton, because that second half was a lot more unpleasant than the first one. And we've said, all along, basically, that Kyle Hamilton, after that rough start, not really having the responsibilities nailed down on that Xavier Worthy touchdown in week 1, some missed tackles against the Raiders, I think, has been, I believe, pretty obviously the Ravens' best defensive player. And he gives you so much flexibility. He can be sticky in man. He can be sticky in zone. He had a couple great run stops today, shedding a tackle to drop a guy near the line of scrimmage. Obviously he's an incredible blitzer, because you just never really know where he's coming from, what he's showing, what he's doing. The Ravens are fortunate in that they have Marlon Humphrey, because he is kind of a ready-made replacement, but obviously that puts more stress on the outside cornerbacks. When the Bengals were lining up with just 2 wide receiver sets tonight, the Ravens were taking Nate Wiggins off the field and saying, we want Marlon Humphrey outside and Brandon Stevens outside. Nate, we're only going to need you for 3 wide receiver sets, 4 wide receiver sets. And, it made sense, because Marlon Humphrey is the better outside cornerback at this point in their career than Nate Wiggins. But the margin for error, and it is already so small, gets even more razor thin if you are having to finagle this roster some way to try to make up for Kyle Hamilton in the aggregate. And I just don't think there's a way to do that, because there's only one Kyle Hamilton in the NFL, and the Ravens have him. And unfortunately, he's got a bit of an ankle injury. I guess the silver lining to this is that, this being a Thursday night, he's going to have 3 more days of rest to get ready for the Steelers. And I think that Steelers offense being what it is, I haven't really looked too deep into them, but I feel like they are not the kind of team that you worry so much about stuff over the middle of the field. Russ Wilson has never really been, in the later stages of his career, a guy who's going to, hit the tight end going up the seam, or find the guy, running the slant, 7 yards in. It just, the moon ball is down the right sideline. That's going to be on Marlon Humphrey. That's going to be on Brandon Stevens. That's going to be on Nate Wiggins. Just, can you win those jump balls? Can you do enough when the ball's in the air to, give that Pittsburgh offense, which is kind of sort of hitting its stride, enough trouble? Because we just don't know how long Kyle's going to be sidelined for. It doesn't sound like it's super long, but you never know. He's been battered and bruised a lot over the past 2 years.
Yeah, we'll get into that Steelers matchup in about a week when we preview that game. Another key divisional game, but as tenuous as this win felt, and the win in week 5 against the Bengals felt, feels a whole lot better to be on the winning side than the losing side, because the Bengals are 4-6. They're pretty buried in the division. Could have had an opportunity to jump up to a 500 record. And for the Ravens, they're 7-3. They're just trying to keep pace at this point, the top of the AFC North, with those Steelers. And so you'd like to have those 2 wins in your pocket, and they are awfully nice when you get the season sweep over a division rival. So we will have a.
I think we should maybe just end on this. I don't want to give away any column ideas, but I had been pitching to our esteemed Kyle Goon just the kind of upside down world that the Ravens are in right now, where the thing that you trust most in any Ravens game at this point is the offense. And the thing that you fear the most when you see on the field and you spend your entire games gnashing your teeth over and pulling your hair out and, stress eating stuff in your face with tacos and burritos and pretzels is the defense, and just how bizarre of a paradigm shift that is. Like even in the Ravens seasons when the defense has been a dumpster fire, like that last Wink Martindale season, or maybe the second to last one, there were obvious, reasons for it. It was COVID. There were injuries. That there was just stuff started to snowball. And with this, again, good health. You got Pro Bowlers at every single level, and yet Joe Burrow goes out there without T. Higgins, without Orlando Brown Jr., we should also add, their best pass protector, and just takes this defense apart like it's the JV. It's so bizarre that this is November 7th, now November 8th, and this defense, I don't think, has improved a lick.
Yeah, it is a complete reversal from the trends of the franchise since they came to Baltimore. It's a new feeling, and it's weird. And I think it's more aesthetically pleasing in some ways, offensively, than these grind out, cold, brutal defensive matchups that we're used to seeing this team play and sneak out. But it's just very different. It's a bizarre world that we are in right now. But you can sit back and enjoy watching Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry in this offense cook, because boy, can they cook. All right, Jonas, it is quite late. It's 1:46 in the morning. You mentioned Kyle Goon. You can read all of Kyle Goon's stuff and Jonas's stuff and Gianna Hahn's stuff on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months. Of course, like, rate, review, subscribe. Write us a nice review. That'd be very nice on Apple Podcasts for the Banner Ravens podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. At Jonas_Shaffer is his Twitter handle. I am at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back in a week to preview Ravens and Steelers.